Welcome back, everybody. Another edition of the Fixed Ops Mastermind powered by OEM Interactive. This week, we are talking coaching for success. I am joined right now by Frank Favaro and Jeremiah Shaw. Christopher Salem will join us in just a moment as soon as he finishes another call, and we'll bring him into the stream as soon as he arrives. So we are going to talk three different segments of coaching today. First, we're going to talk about what is coaching, and along with what is coaching, segment 2 will be coaching style, and we'll talk to these three gentlemen about what their style is and what style, how you determine what style coaching the person or people that you're working with need. And segment 3 is going to be success after coaching. Obviously, people hire coaches, but they don't have coaches for life, right? So you need to be able to take what you've learned, what they've given you, and implement that in your life and continue that on throughout your life. And so this week's show is being brought to you by fixedopsjobs.com. It is the only completely fixed operations focused job site around. All dealership jobs. You don't have to wade through a bunch of things that don't apply to what you're looking for. So fixedopsjobs.com. Thank you very much for bringing us this week's show. Christopher, welcome.
Thank you for being patient. Good to be here.
Absolutely. Everybody's got to keep their schedules shifting around, right?
Correct.
All right. And so let's start out and let everybody kind of know who we are here. Right. So Frank, we'll start with you. How'd you get here? Right. Did you wake up at 5 years old and go, I'm going to be a coach? That's what I'm going to do with my life. Or was it a different path?
Yeah, I think most of us would say it was probably a different path. But for me, I grew up, I was an athlete and I was a wrestler, and I grew up in an environment of coaches and wrestling. And the number one goal of a coach when I was a kid was to, and the way I looked at a coach is because the coaches that I worked with, they impacted my life for the better. They brought value to me. They helped me see the things I maybe didn't see. They didn't, from where I was putting myself, my positioning, my feet, my technique. And maybe maybe I wasn't pushing myself right to a certain level. So for myself, it was, and being an athlete and then going through and wrestling through high school and then through college. For me, I look at coaching and, going through high school, I was a very high level wrestler. I was so fortunate enough to be coached by National Wrestling Hall of Fame coach Bill Barger. He was my youth and my high school coach. And, we were fortunate enough to win 4 state and national championships. So I learned what I consider the basic fundamentals of coaching through him. But I spent 2 years of college. I was burned out of wrestling. I didn't want to wrestle anymore. So the moment I didn't want to wrestle anymore, that's when I decided to quit school. So I knew I had no really life skills. For me, it was, what do I do now? All I know how to do is exercise and lose weight. So what can I make a living doing when all I know how to is exercise and lose weight? And that's when I went into the fitness industry, and I help people get started on exercise programs to accomplish their health and fitness goals. And for me, that was a one-on-one 7-year masterclass of coaching, how to show empathy, how to understand what people are really after, how to connect with people, how to build relationships. And that's what really hooked me, was that one-on-one coaching people, understanding people, breaking down their barriers, helping them be successful. And I always say, I spent the first 20 years of my life 100% all in on myself winning. And I've spent the last, 20 plus years of helping other people win. And that's what I do today. And that's what coaching means to me.
Love that. We'll just continue down the line. Jeremiah, how about yourself?
Yeah, like Frank, I'll go to the past real quick. I came from a helping family. My mom was a nurse, and so in the medical field, and my father was a psychologist. He specialized on a lot of family therapy, but he started honing in on the back half of his career on men and midlife crisis. So a lot of professionals in that burnout phase. And I leaned into that. He coached my baseball team for a long time. And so like Frank came from the athletic side. And so really got to see behind the curtains of his professional career and really loved that psychology side. And so went on from there, jumped into a nonprofit world, again, a helping industry, and but found a love for fundraising and sales. And so I ended up managing a sales team at another company. Again, my favorite, reflecting back, my favorite part of the job was developing the team members. And as you sat down with them saying, hey, how do we not only increase sales, those conversations usually were not a skill set issue. They were a mindset, which obviously bled over into the personal life. And so we spent a lot of time talking about what do they want? Who do they want to be? Which are two really popular coaching questions to start out with. What do you want to be able to do in your life? And so I said, man, I've got to do this. I read a leadership book, Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last. And I was like, how do I do this full time? So, almost a decade ago, I jumped into the leadership development world and started running down this pathway of coaching.
That's great. And it's very true that you're never going to figure out where you're going until you know what you actually want, right? Yeah. That's key to starting there. Christopher,
Hey, Dave.
how about your journey?
Well, very similar to both Frank and Jeremiah. I mean, for me, I came from a family of teachers. My mother was a teacher. My father wasn't, but I had aunts and uncles. So I guess I always had that teacher in me. It's just that because I grew up with a father that was very business driven, it was drilled into my head that if you're going to be successful in life, you have to go into business, not teaching. But a lot of times that, if it all came full circle when I became in my 30s, I began to realize that all of my things, that all my energy that I put into being successful in business, while it did pay off, it shortchanged my personal life. My personal life, my well-being, my relationships were not in alignment at all with my success in business. And I knew that if you're going to be successful long-term, you got to have that work-life harmony. And that was clearly something I didn't have. And as I began to work on myself, I went on a journey of working on myself for several years while I was still working, changing my thought patterns and how I think, and what my priorities changed. And as a result of it, all of those experiences began to compound now that I can now take that and now utilize that through my example and resourcefulness, that now I could help others do the same, both on an individual level, a team level, an organizational level. And I can now be an example of that. I can be a resource, because a great coach leads by example. They're not, a consultant will do it for you. You're paying for them to, fix something, but a great coach will, even a mentor will, coach you through how to do it yourself and feel good about it. And now I was able to tap into those teaching skills that I guess I got from my mother and through my family, and merge it together with the business. And now it was just a dream come true, that now I could now do something I really love to do. And when I wake up every day, this isn't a job to me. It's something I love to do. I love helping people. I love helping organizations. I love helping people generate results, but knowing that you have to go through challenges, obstacles, setbacks, and to embrace it if we're going to appreciate and sustain with having more results. So it's not about just win at all costs. It's about winning and learning. Even when you don't win, you're learning, and how great coaching can help change one's way to communicate to themselves differently in a positive way, to others, how they behave, their attitude that's happening for you, not to you, your emotions and how you respond versus react to situations and other people, and your action, that you're focused on the priorities that truly matter, letting go of the things that don't, and really developing what I like to call the 4 pillars of success: foundation, and how we think from intentions rather than expectations, because we can focus on we can control our intentions, we can't control expectations. And from that EQ, build that strong foundation so we can now be better prepared. So we prepare better and breaking things down, having systems and processes and activities to help achieve those goals, execute on them, and then measure to see what works, what doesn't, and repeat that process.
That's great. What can you give us just the 4 pillars?
Foundation, preparation, execution, measurement.
Love it. All right. So that gives us an overview of where all of you came from. And so now, continuing with the segment topic of what is coaching, let's talk a little bit about what coaching actually is to each of you. I think there's some different thoughts out there where from a people can look at coaching from a sports side. I think that's obviously a much different type of coach, but within the business world, so a coach, is that somebody who is, as Christopher mentioned, a consultant can come in and do it for you? Is a coach somebody who is just asking you questions so that you can try to find something out yourself or find something that you already have within yourself? Or are you, as coaches, using combinations of, here's what I already know, so I can help you with this, and I can give you this to help move you along, as well as asking the questions to kind of develop out of them more things? Jeremiah, start with you there.
Yeah, I love talking about this topic, and like you said, there are a lot of different definitions within the industry, and excited to see what everybody else says. I like starting with what I believe what coaching isn't, which is it's not mentoring. I define mentoring as, hey, I've done that. Let me show you how I've done it, which in a fast-moving, ever-changing world can be difficult to find that rhythm. And there's a place for all of these areas, these helping areas and definitions in people's lives. It's not therapy. As my dad was a therapist, I really respect that industry. So I always want to be clear, therapy is about the past. It's about what anchors have been dropped throughout your life that might be holding you back, that you need to figure out how to pull up to be able to move forward before we start coaching. It's also not consulting. Consulting is about getting in there, fixing a specific problem based on an expertise that you hold and showing up and saying, this is what you need to do. And so my definition of coaching comes down to, who do you want to be? And then what do you want to be able to do? And so being able to say, hey, where are we currently at, and where do we want to go? And let's create a strategy to get you there. My philosophy is very non-directive. So a lot of questions, a lot of walking people through, what are your values? What's your personal life vision and mission? And then correlating that back to the organization as I work with executives as well.
Frank?
Yeah. So when we think about coaching, like for me personally, my mindset is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you really care. So coaching starts there. Everything else I throw out the window. It's understanding and actively understanding that, like, I've got your back and I'm here for your best interest. I want to see you win. Like, I want to see you progress. I want to see you get where you want to go so you can achieve what you want to achieve. And that's number one. Like, the relationship is everything up front. And until you have that, you don't have trust. And so once that is broken down and you have that, then you start, it's easier to get buy-in. But coaching is, yeah, I agree. It's not consulting. Consulting is you're doing the work. Coaching is coming in, sharing ideas, understanding what the who, what, where, when, why, how is, and then putting a plan together and helping them somewhat find the answers. I do a lot less talking in my training, my workshops, my coaching sessions than I do talking. I want them to think. It's getting them to think and come up with the answers themselves. Because I believe you're going to have more success using a fly rod than a feeding tube, trying to pound something down someone's throat that they haven't even bought into yet. But once they come up with the ideas, then they start to accept, where they're going and what they're after. So coaching is about doing, it's about understanding, and it's also about getting reps. It's about doing, and I don't like the word, role playing, but it's about real playing. It's about doing it for real. Let's practice doing this and let's get better at it. And then, who's got great feedback, and we're all here to practice and improve. So let's put our guards down and get better together. So that's coaching to me.
That's great. I love the feeding tube analogy. That is an easy picture to come up with in your head. Christopher, how about you?
Well, I agree with both Jeremiah and Frank. When it comes to coaching, a great coach knows how to ask questions, and how you build rapport with somebody. It depends on the individual. You're dealing with a type A personality, a high D. You're dealing with somebody who's task oriented versus people oriented. It's not one size fits all. So a great coach understands personality types, multi-generational types, understands different backgrounds and how you do that, and how you relate and understand is so important. So again, we have 2 ears, one mouth. So it's the ability to ask really high level questions, things that are going to allow them to get to what is the challenge that could be better, the real challenge that could be better. What are the results they seek and don't have? And what you could be doing as a great coach is, while you're asking those questions, you could be disguising the impact that you would like to get across to get them to think. So now they got to answer for themselves. So a lot of times, when you can empower people, to do that, they're doing it for themselves. You only guided them. You're not actually doing it for them like a consultant would. And I find that great coaches are also resourceful, knowing that it doesn't always have to, be on you. You can utilize really great resources and allowing those resources to help people. I'm always a big fan of compiling certain resources that I could share in certain situations that I feel would be best aligned to where that coaching client is, and how it could help them, or him or her, help themselves as a result of it. And like Frank said, you got to earn that trust over time, and relationships are built over time. I mean, trust takes a long time to build up, but you can end in seconds. So, again, I got to always make sure that I'm operating from my shared, those values that resonate who I am, transparency, honesty, and integrity. And that shows up in my communication, my behavior, my attitude, my emotions, my action every day. And as a result of that, that's going to connect on a shared value with the other person. And then from those shared values is how we can build rapport and help them to win long term.
All right. And so that takes me into what we feel is needed for experience to be a coach. Right. And I hear people all the time, especially if you scroll through Instagram a bit, you're going to hear the gurus out there telling you that if somebody hasn't made $42 gajillion, they can't teach you how to have an online business and all this other stuff. Right. But to me, I can't fix a car. Right. People who have heard me tell my story about starting in this industry, for 4 years, I was a tech and I wasn't a good tech. But I have been able to coach technicians at a very high level, right? I don't need to know how to fix a car to know how to work with that technician. Same thing with professional athletes. There's a lot of professional athletes that have a whole bunch of coaches who have never played a professional sport, right? And so what is it that we actually need to be able to be an effective coach for somebody? Because I don't believe it's that you need the direct experience in what they're looking for in coaching. I'll leave that one open. Whoever wants to take that one.
I can take it. So I really thought about this. I've really tried to figure this question out. And my mentor, Bob Berg, who's author of the book, The Go-Giver, he has this success formula. And so I just use his because there's no sense me trying to recreate a wheel. I believe that the success formula it really breaks down to three things. So the first thing to be a great coach or an effective coach, regardless of your industry or what you're doing, you got to have the right information. Step one, right? So whatever that it is, you need the right information. So you have to determine, do I have it? Do I not have it? And then the second step, once you make that determination, okay, we've got the right information that we need to implement. The second is you have to act immediately. Like you have to act, because the law of diminishing intent, I'm sure you guys have heard of it, but it states that the longer you wait to do the thing you know you need to do, the greater the chance is you never do that thing, right? So number one, you've got the information. Number two, you act immediately. And then the third step is you must be persistent. And a lot of times with coaching, it's awkward at first, right? Because you're doing new things. You're getting people to try things they're not used to doing. And I always say it's better to do it poorly than to not do it at all. So do those things. And I always go back to my fitness journey. There was people getting started on exercise programs that they couldn't stand what they were doing, right? It was uncomfortable. It was awkward. They felt stupid doing it. But at the same time, that persistence, 30 days down the road, once they get some traction, then they start to get a little bit of results. And that's how the business takes off typically also. So those are the three things I typically see with that success formula of how can we be effective as coaches.
All right. Who wants next?
Yeah, I love that. And Dave, like you said and pointed out, you don't have to be an industry expert to coach somebody. There's a great book called Coach the Person, Not the Problem. And when we're coaching problems, we're talking about industry. And I think there's two things in my experience that I've really had to hone in on to be an excellent coach, which would be understand business acumen, have some level of a good level of business acumen so you can bring in and understand the data like Frank was talking about. What is the data that the client's giving you within context? The second is the psychology of just some level of the psychology of human behavior and change, and how do we help move people forward? Those are the things. And then curiosity. If you're not a curious person, and I think it's already been said, you're not curious along with caring for the person. You can't just flip rocks over just to flip rocks over, right? You're going to tear something up, but being able to be intentional about the rocks we're turning over for the right reasons, for their benefit, and caring about them through that process. So having just relentless curiosity of figuring out what is going on here, what's making this tick here.
All right, Christopher. I think I remember one of the first times that I asked you a question through LinkedIn, and I believe it was like, how do you end up coaching in the aerospace industry?
Yeah. I spent a number of years in that industry, so I know it. Well, one of the things I would say too, when it comes to coaching, is while there's always going to be different viewpoints on different things. I always feel like, it's not one size fits all, right? It's all depends on what areas that you're coaching in and so on. So if you're coaching on mindset and emotional intelligence and you have no clue about emotional intelligence mindset, then probably not should be coaching there. Okay. Yes, you can still be a great coach, but you got to have some kind of knowledge in some kind of area. But one thing I always find that universally applies to all coaching is the ability to communicate. And how we communicate is so important. First, how we communicate to ourselves as coaches. Every day, I have a daily routine, and I ask myself, where am I communicating from? Am I communicating from my inner champion, my inner critic? And obviously, for the last 20 years that I've been doing this daily routine, I'm operating more from my inner champion than my inner critic. Like in the old days, that's all I operated from. I wonder why I was operating from anger every day of my life. But with that being said, how I communicate to myself in a specific, clear, and concise way is going to allow me how I'm going to communicate to another person, especially a coaching client. And not just that I'm talking, it's asking the right questions. It's body language. Effective communication consists of 55% is in a person's body language. It's 38% in the tone of their voice. 7% is words. So if I'm only attuned to words, what they're saying, and not really being really aligned with their body language and their tone, then I'm missing a lot of what's happening. And so am I going to be effective coaching them to the next level if I'm not really? No. And because again, most communication is based on assumptions and speculation. That's why we have expectations that fall through the crack, because we're caught up in the control we can't control. I strive every day to be a better communicator and always recognize that in myself first, then other people. So I'm always, in terms of sensory acuity, on top of where people are from their body language, their tone of their voice. So even when they're saying something, I could pick up on their body language and I could say, oh, they're saying that, and their body language is contradicting everything they're saying. So I know how to pick up on that and then ask another question, not putting them on the spot like that, but asking a question to really get to the truth of what's really happening. Mm-hmm. Because anybody can say anything and doesn't mean that's what's happening or what they're really feeling.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen the TED Talk that the guy did about nothing, that you can look that up. That'll greatly prove that, because that's literally what he's doing is just talking gibberish, but he's doing it in in a very positive way with great body language. And his whole point is that it's your words matter the least amount in all that you're saying, as odd as that may seem. All right, we are going to get ready to move into segment 2 here. Before we do, we have our stat of the week, and that is brought to you by IntelliCheck. Businesses who invested in coaching saw a $7.90 return for every $1 spent, equating to a 690% ROI. That is out of a study done by Metrics Global LLC. And that is a pretty good ROI that I would bet if you offered that in actual monetary value to somebody, not as if you do this coaching, you'll get this. But if I said that I could give you you could give me $1 and I'd give you 690 back, I'm pretty sure people would take that. So obviously has a great big impact on people's lives, and the money that they spend for coaching definitely comes back to them. And so segment 2, we're talking about coaching styles, and segment 2 is brought to you by Parts Edge. Parts Edge is your parts department, is the backbone of your dealership and is responsible for nearly half of your total profits, according to NADA. Our system works within your DMS for a hybrid approach that combines the precision of automation with the nuanced decision-making of parts experts. Thank you, Parts Edge. And so coaching style, how would each of you speak about your coaching style? And more importantly, how has it evolved? What looks different today from how you coached 5, 10, 15 years ago? We'll start in the middle with Jeremiah.
Yeah. Thank you. My background was I did play athletics, and so the outcome was really important to me. And then I got into sales, and so I'm a natural driver. And I think when I started, it was all about this equation of, okay, what do you want? How do we get you there as quickly as we can? And I think part of what was cheating clients through that season of my coaching journey was their journey. Part of coaching is just experiencing the experience of being experienced. And when we're going fast and just getting it done, we're not recognizing things about us. We're not really becoming self-aware, and which is taking away a lot of the motivators. And so what I've learned to do is really embrace a lot of emotional practices within the coaching and shift into, hey, what are your emotions? What are your value systems? And then what are your strengths? And so my style is still a little bit directive. I really try to go pretty non-directive these days and leave a lot of room for their self-discovery. My belief and theory is that they are creative and resourceful themselves, and they have what they need already. We just have to shake them a little bit and give that float to the top. And the action would be, hey, how do we help them capture that learning experience through this thing we call coaching?
I can't hear you.
Christopher.
Oh, there you go. We went silent there for a minute. I didn't know what we was doing. So style. I would say when it comes to, I'm a recovering passive aggressive. So I'll point that out. When I say a recovering passive aggressive, I was a passive communicator and an aggressive behaviorist. So you can imagine how confusing that could be in a leadership role, or even let alone any relationship. It's not good. I learned the hard way. But with that being said, what I learned how to do through that self-discovery a number of years back was I learned how to be assertive. And by being assertive, you have to be really real with yourself. You got to be comfortable with your own strengths, your own weaknesses, your flaws, learning to be transparent, learning to be vulnerable, and all the things that I learned that were opposite of being strong, which were not correct. So when I learned how to be assertive, I began to implement that into my coaching style, because I could say that when I got into coaching, I had already kind of been assertive. Like, it wasn't something that evolved after the fact, because I had worked on myself way before I got into coaching, and learned from my mistakes in various leadership roles or running organizations, that type of thing. And the ability to be assertive in my style is that it's my responsibility to be, that as the sender or the receiver, the communication, to be specific, clear, and concise. Because I can't control my client. I can't control who I'm coaching, what they're going to say, how they're going to get back to me, what they're going to perceive what I said. I can only be specific, clear, and concise, and hoping that they understand, and that I got to do the same in terms of my listening, to make sure that I ask the right questions to keep peeling back the onion, to help them really help themselves when it comes to making their challenge better and the results they seek, to obtain them. And I have to, by doing that and being assertive, just allows me to kind of enjoy the process, see their involvement, and just see their confidence grow and their self-esteem grow, and in embracing the challenges and the setbacks, and then hopefully coming out on the other side, landing on their feet, which a lot of them do, and it's just the process. So for me, it's about being assertive, and assertive is not being direct. It's about being specific, clear, and concise with my communication, my attitude, my emotions, my action, my behavior, and my attitude consistently. And that's what I strive to do as a coach.
All right. I love the passive aggressive description there. Can see a lot of that in myself.
Matter of fact, I just talked on that just before I got on the show with a company in California. That's what we were talking about: improving workforce relationships.
Yeah, I can definitely see that in myself as an early leader of being very lackadaisical in my communication, but not in the lack of response from the team. So, all right, Frank, how about you? What kind of evolution and for you? I know you mentioned earlier that you grew up wrestling, and you kind of glazed over the success that you had in wrestling with a bunch of championships and wrestling at the D1 level. That's a high level to wrestle at, and so I've got to believe that somehow influences how you coach.
Yeah. So when I started coaching, it's so funny to look back then versus now, because, we should be evolving, right? Every day we should be evolving. And, I think when I started, I was like, I'm the coach and I'm supposed to coach. And you think you have this thing in your head, but it's not really, the way it really is supposed to go. So for me, going back to wrestling, a huge takeaway from wrestling that sticks with me today is this right here. It's really hard to be great at something if you're not having fun doing it. You have to have fun. And that's the biggest thing I bring to my workshops now. We have fun. Like, we compete. I give out trophies. People are screaming and yelling, and we have fun. Like, we really have and if you're any of my clients or company people I've worked with, you know what I'm talking about. It's people walk away saying this was the funnest coaching experience, training experience we've ever had. And that's what I try to do, is create an experience with it. You can go get training, coaching anywhere, and people have this idea of evidence. I got to sit there and just get talked at for 4 hours, and it's painful. I have taken a completely different approach. It's extremely collaborative and extremely fun, because that's the only way we're going to get great going in that direction. It's got to be fun. So that's probably my biggest evolution of where I started from to where I do today.
So how do I'll stick with you on this, Frank, because this is, I think, along that same lines. How do you balance between pushing them and pinning them to the mat, or supporting them in where they need to go, right? Because as you mentioned earlier, when you start with somebody, it's uncomfortable most times for people. And they maybe don't want to open up, or they're not used to some questions that you're going to ask. And so how do you maintain that balance between helping them get the best out of them, but also giving them the space that they need?
I think that starts with setting very clear expectations up front of what this is going to look like, what this is going to feel like, and how it typically is going to play out. And number one, like as a coach, you're a lot of different things in one hat. You're right, your psychologist, your friend, your you're there to hold people accountable to a degree, right? You have to do a lot of different things, and you have to wear a lot of different hats. And when we really break down, like, how do you do that? I think it starts with setting those clear expectations, number one, up front. But then also, it's understanding that not everyone is necessarily the right fit potential relationship, and that's okay. There's other people out there too. So, like, here's what I've come to understand, and I think it's better to always talk about some failures because you learn from failure. And I like failure is more important because you can learn. And so, in my coaching relationships early on, when it didn't work out, I wanted it more than they did, and it can't be that way. They have to want it bad, right? We have to want to achieve this because we're not used to doing the things that it's going to take necessarily to get where we want to go. So there has to be that mutual commitment up front. Hey, remember when we started, you said it was going to do this. I understand you're not in the habit of doing this, but and it's always getting back to that why. Like, why are we doing this? Like, what's the purpose of doing this, coach? Like, what are we really after here? And once we uncover that and we make those commitments and, hey, I'm going to help you get there. But this is, I want to be very clear with people, because the worst thing that could happen is people walk away saying, like, that didn't work. For me personally, the way I look at this is it's my number one objective for the relationship, the coaching experience, to be the best decision my clients ever make. And that's not going to happen unless we're on the same page and we're lockstep from the get-go.
That's great. All right, quick break this time for the quote of the week. I absolutely believe that people, unless coached, never reach their maximum capabilities. That is from Bob Nardelli, and that is brought to you by AWN Inc., Automotive Warranty Network Incorporated. It's a family-owned and operated warranty claims management service based out of Denver, Colorado. For over 30 years, our highly qualified warranty administrators, team leaders, auditors, trainers, and support staff have been processing manufacturer warranty claims. They have currently processed more than 100 million in warranty per month. That's a lot of warranty claims. And so thank you, AWN Inc. And so how do we measure effectiveness in coaching? It's not always, it's not as clear as for the fixed operations world at looking at gross profit at the end of the day, end of the month. So how do we keep track of success here? Christopher, start with you.
Well, I would say it's going to be different things for different people, what their objectives are and what's important to them. But I always say that what's, always important and what makes things sustainable is what are the people now are being like, what is something they've changed now that they're being different. And now that they're being that, how are they becoming that of something new or different that will serve them as a result of that beingness? And then by becoming it, they can do things differently. And then how they do things differently will reflect in what those results will be. And a lot of times it's just how we think differently. Again, I've learned how to, I don't operate from expectations. I used to be something I lived by my whole life, but I operate from intentions. I don't operate from exit. So it's just a matter of view of a point. And so every person I work with what really is important to them. What are the things that they want to make improvements? But for me, if I'm just looking at it overall, it's what people, what they be to become to do and have those results, whether it's their personal well-being, how they look at themselves, how they can get up in the morning and say, I like myself, I appreciate myself, how they appreciate other people, and how, again, that they can just be a human being that can, make a difference in any role or any duties that they're involved in. Again, that's just speaking universally, but everyone's going to have different specific objectives that are important to them. And those come along with it too, if we're going to be effective in coaching. And I'm not perfect, never will be. And I'm always very straightforward with that. We're, as Frank talked about, we're always evolving. Everybody's always evolving. And as a result of it, that's what I strive to get across, that, hey, nobody graduates here. There's no graduation. Even though there might be certificates along the way, we're always learning and growing to the time we leave this planet. And even probably then, we're probably still evolving, whatever that might look like. I can't answer that question, but nonetheless, that's how I look at it. It's that, what we be to become, to do, and have a different result, better results.
All right. Jeremiah?
Yeah, I had a boss probably 15 years ago. He'd always say, well, the proof is in the pudding. And he's always talking to the sales team about the pipeline, right? Well, we'll see how this plays out. And he'd say that all the time. And I'm like, he's from the South. And he's like, I was sitting there. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we can figure this out now. And I think in coaching, it's kind of the same way. Like, hey, we're going to see results on the back end. I mean, the proof really is in the pudding. We're going to see results. But there are some ways and practices that in my practice, I do exercise, which one would be, we start with self-assessments. And so we want the individual to find integrity. I mean, consistency lives in integrity. And so being able to say, hey, what we believe, what we say, and what we do, are these aligning up? Because if we're casting a vision without identifying what the reality is, we can't actually provoke change. And so what we want to do is figure out where we actually at. And so we do a kind of a pre-assessment with them. We do a couple different pre-assessments to measure where do they think they're at. So they measure themselves on kind of this 5 dimensions of health that we've created. And then we have a third-party assessment that we utilize. And we will come back to that every 3 to 6 months for them to measure themselves. So again, starting with themselves. And then we use a lot of executive 360s. And so that might just be the team they work with professionally, or we might bring in a spouse or somebody personally that they do life with outside of work. Because again, we're coaching that whole person and really trying to get holistic about this of what's going on in their life. And what we're doing is casting the vision, coming back to the reality, casting the vision, coming back to the reality, and creating strategy in between those things. So, that's a question that comes up when you meet with the CFO of what's the ROI of this? They always want to know. And we said, hey, here's how we're going to approach this. And we're an open book. We can talk about this as we progress. But like the stat you proposed, $1, what is it, $7.40 or something for every dollar invested. And that's my experience. I mean, the proof is in the pudding on this.
Great. Frank?
Yeah. So for me, in my coaching practice, measuring success is a big part of it, because if we're not measuring success, meaning like, well, it feels good, it seems good, is it working? Like, I realized early on I needed to have we need to bring some legitimate, KPIs to the table. So for me personally today, I won't work with a company until they make the commitment to start measuring success. And we figure it out typically on whatever is important in their business. But one that typically always is, because Gallup just announced 2024 studies show us we're at the 10-year low of employees, are not engaged, right? So I think that's a trend across every industry right now, employee disengagement. So what we will do to help these companies is I've created it. It's called the Voice of the Employee Survey. So it's very simple, right? It's a scale from 1 to 5. 5 is an extremely satisfied employee. 1 is a extremely dissatisfied employee. 4 is satisfied. 3 is just a job. 2 is somewhat dissatisfied. And I send this out. And the beautiful thing about it is it's a 100% anonymous third-party survey conducted by me. And we actually get a baseline of where our employees are. Like, what does that score look like overall? And then I can show moving the needle. Like, for example, a company we just created a case study on last week, 136% increase in extremely satisfied employees year over year. Extremely satisfied employees run circles around somewhat satisfied employees, right? So like, we will figure out whatever we got to figure out. But like, if you have engaged employees and extremely engaged employees, your business is going to skyrocket, right? So we measure that. We measure, word of mouth referrals. That's a great measure for customer experience. If you're not measuring your referrals, how do you know how your experience is? Great referrals means great customer experience, client experience. We measure employee experience. You do net promoter scores. We do margin. We work with companies that want to measure margin. And if you are creating a better overall experience, your margins should definitely improve also. But we figure out really what it is, what's lacking. A lot of companies recently, it's been celebrated. Like, how do we recognize success? What are we doing to recognize employees? That Gallup study also showed that the average employee goes 50 days in between recognition. Like, they haven't been recognized for 1, 2, 3, 4, 49, 50 days is the average. So what we praise, we raise, right? If we want better performance, we have to recognize people and start celebrating more success. So we do a lot of KPIs that measure those type of things. But the idea is we got to measure something, right? Because what we measure, right, we can manage. And if we don't do that, then how do we know if it's really, truly working with a tangible number that says, well, this was the best decision I made, right? So that's what we're doing.
All right. Some wide-ranging answers. I love the differences there. And so we're gonna get ready to move into segment 3. But before we do that, it's a special double stat week. And the second stat of the week is brought to you by Parts Edge. And it's workers who receive coaching experience productivity increases of up to 86% when compared to those who only receive training. And that is from a founder study. And so I think that kind of goes to the point you were just making there, Frank, where the coaching can be measured in performance, but also that study mentions coaching as opposed to training. So before we hit segment 3, for success after coaching, let's touch on that first. What's the difference between coaching and training? We're just teaching somebody how to think, right? We're just training them how to think, how to act, what they have to do. So, Chris, start with you on this.
So share the question. So I want to make sure I heard it correctly.
So the difference between coaching and training.
Coaching and training, yeah. So I would say that coaching is to coach several people at the same level. It's almost virtually impossible. I always find coaching in smaller groups is always more effective than in larger groups. And sometimes it can be a combination of coaching or training when you're coaching multiple people, because training is going to be pretty much where, you're sharing information, creating awareness, allowing them to absorb it, using some group activities or certain things to get them to experience on some level of how this could work and what can they do different. And then the coaching is more kind of like, in a way, like, how do we, personalize it a little bit more to their unique or self situation. And yes, you could coach a team too, don't get me wrong, but knowing that intermittently you can coach and train at the same time. I always like to ask a lot of questions, so that would be the coaching end of it, and the training would be more where I might introduce a concept, a methodology, a process, whatever it may be, and then kind of get some input, get some feedback, and then ask certain questions, especially maybe where I align with somebody's body language, their tone, what they said, and maybe then where I can focus, where I can do a coaching with them without even knowing it. And now it's helping them, but it's also helping other people that might be observing that, because they could be facing a similar situation. So I think that there is a difference, absolutely. And I think if you know how to kind of, utilize both of them, knowing when to go back and forth, it works really well.
All right. Jeremiah?
Yeah. So the difference between coaching and training, training, you're showing up, it's very topical. You're showing up with something the organization's identified, whether it's, hey, let's talk about dynamic leadership or let's talk about communication styles. And you're showing up with content for the participants. In coaching, the person or client is the content. And so what we're doing is walking through a thought-provoking process, usually a series of questions to help them become more self-aware of their surroundings, increase their emotional intelligence, which would increase their relational capacity with those that they lead or are doing life with professionally and personally. International Coaching Federation has a great example or definition on their website that talks about this. And it's a great resource for organizations to review, hey, what is coaching? How do we leverage coaching internally? And also, how do we leverage coaching by hiring a third party like Frank, Christopher, or myself to bring in? So coaching is really walking through somebody and becoming an expert on the person. And we're not really talking about a specific topic. We may talk about topics, but that's not the focus of the session. Now, like Chris said, we can provide frameworks and tools that might be applicable as they bring the context of their environment to the sessions. But in our practice at our firm, we're hyper focused on the individual. How are they thinking? What are their belief systems that are holding them back? What potential might be untapped that they're not recognizing that we need to uncover a little bit?
All right. Frank, how about you?
So I look at training as a little bit more because, and maybe this is just because I was a trainer, in physical fitness, right? So, but I look at training as a little bit more consistent, right? It's more consulting. It's you're going to be there on these days, or it's a virtual process, right? But every single week you're meeting and you're having a 1 hour meeting and you're making sure and you're doing some of the work for them to help them get, where they want to go. And I look at coaching as a little bit more of you're laying out a plan. You're helping them, don't get me wrong, but in 90 days, this is, the roadmap and this is what you're going to want to do. And if they need something, you're there for them, right? You'll obviously always take their call, and if they want to get on and do a meeting, fine, that's great if they have questions. But I think I look at training as a little bit more consulting than coaching.
All right. And so with that, we're going to move into segment 3, which is success after coaching. Before we do that, Christopher has his own live radio show that starts at 3 p.m.
Spot 6-7 minutes.
There you go. So, we've got you've got about a minute and a half or so before it's 5 minutes before you hop off. So, number one, appreciate you being here. Grateful for you spending some time with us, and give you some last thoughts on success after coaching.
So success after coaching, I just think everybody can benefit from coaching. I mean, even us, all three of us here, and we all benefit. I have a coach, always have and always will. I mean, just because we've learned a lot doesn't mean we're always going to know it. We're always constantly learning and evolving. And I think every great coach has a coach. And a lot of fact, I got coaches in a lot of different areas. And sometimes it's shocking who are some of my coaches. There were people that you would least suspect. I mean, my son is my coach, believe it or not, when it comes to technology, I'm not good at that. And he helps me in so many different areas, even in our business as well. And so I'm a big fan of success is evolving. It's ongoing. It's in the eye of the beholder. And if we're going to keep winning and make it sustainable, we have to step up each day to be the teacher, to be the student simultaneously, and be always eager to learn and grow. And that's how I show up every day.
It's great. Again, Chris, thank you for your time. I know you got to jump. And
yeah, thanks, guys. Let's meet you guys.
See you, Chris.
See ya.
All right. Jeremiah, we'll go over to you with this for success after coaching. What are some strategies that you use to help clients develop their long-term vision for their leadership journey?
Yeah, absolutely. One before we wrap up coaching. So what we do is reset every 6 months. Our goal is not to create reliance on a coach. We want self-reliance for the organization and the individual. And so what we're going to wrap up very kind of put a bow on it by the 6th month is, are their values clear around who they are? How do they operate? Right? Because during crisis or change, that's what we come back to. That's our compass, along with the vision of where are we going? And so making sure that those two things are clear. What are their values and what are their vision and those can be incremental. It can be 6 months out. Where do you go 6 months out? It can be a lifelong statement, right? A lot of those value systems don't change. And sometimes we do evolve and we add things and take things out as we grow and hold that growth mindset. So that's first and foremost. And I always say, when I meet with organizations or an individual, what are your mission, vision, values? And are they alive? And when I say alive, can you repeat them? Can you state them? How are they acted out? Again, the integrity, what we believe is what we say and what we do. And is there a consistency there for them? So until clients to that point, which hopefully by the end of those 6 months they are. So that's a great start. The second one is who's in their corner. Frank talked about this a lot, about accountability. These leaders that we're coaching, a lot of times don't have somebody holding them accountable, even if they have a board or maybe they're president and they have a CEO. A lot of times those accountability conversations really aren't happening until it's too late, and they're more consequential. So what we're talking about in coaching is, how do we hold you accountable based on what you've co-created with your coach? Where do you want to go? And are you going to accomplish those things? So again, before we pass them off, do they have a community that's going to hold them accountable? And then do they have a team? We're very strengths focused. What are their strengths? And where are they wasting their time and burning the rubber, right? Just spinning tires. Do they have the right people on the team to supplement those areas of weakness? Have they built a team around them to help their success and to help them focus on what they're great at? And so those are the areas we're really focusing on as we wrap up those sessions.
That's great. Frank?
Yeah, so coaches, business, I always take coaching back to the greats. All use coaches. You look at every professional athlete, look at the quarterback position in the NFL. There's only so many of them. They're the best at what they do in the world, and they all have multiple coaches helping them try to get 0.5% better, right? They're so good already, right? But they're constantly working, looking for new ideas, new processes, different ways of looking at the world, a different lens, a different approach, whatever that is. They're always constantly challenging themselves to get better. And they have that continuous improvement mindset. And I just don't understand sometimes how businesses who value athletics also don't look at it that same way. I have 3 coaches, personally. I'm constantly using coaches for new ideas and to learn things, and how can we be better than we are today, and how would I kick my own ass if I was a competitor? Right? How would I do? How would I go? How could I improve? And when we start looking at it through that lens, it's not an expense, and it's an investment. Mm-hmm. It's an investment, and that's what it's all about. We invest looking to win and to win, right? To improve, and that's actually what coaching is.
Yeah, I love that investment word, Frank. I think one thing, since we're in this automotive space here, it's even after we've wrapped that up, come back for a tune-up, for that oil change. Is the engine running optimal? We're just part of the pit crew.
Yeah. And so lastly, we've got a couple minutes left. How do we ensure that the changes and improvements that get achieved while they're engaging you as a coach, how do we ensure that those stick with the person? Jeremiah.
Yeah. Again, like those check-ins, a lot of clients that have wrapped up will do quarterly check-ins or biannual check-ins and just see how things are going and tune that up. Hopefully they've hired another coach if kind of the purpose. A lot of times you hire a coach for a purpose or a season, right? And that's really beneficial to the client. We want what's best for that client. And so that's good. Again, usually an organization sponsor that hires a coach on behalf of an executive, they have expectations, right? And so at the beginning and the end, you'll meet with that organization and the client and be able to say, did we meet expectations? Or what are the next seasons of objectives and growth for this individual? And so they're constantly honing in on the target for their career professionally and hopefully personally as well. And so, but I think one of the best ways people can do that is, again, write it down. It's not written, it's not alive. Come back to that at all times. Have a clear strategy for that growth. And don't be scared to pull over and check in. You know, that I love that phrase, oil change, and get that tune up.
That's great. All right, Frank, Jeremiah, thank you so much for your time. I know everybody got a ton of value out of this, and we really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to come and share some knowledge with the fixed ops industry. And so with that, thank you. And we will see everybody next week.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.